Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I am Doug Cameron.
On this week's episode, a dramatic Olympic preview and which NHL teams will be affected most by the break.
We will also oogle over NHL Revealed and take a look at a few names being tossed down the trade rumor pipeline.
Oogle. All that and more. Let's drop the puck on episode 30. Episode 30, Luke Lipinski here, across the table from Doug Cannon.
That's me.
Doug, how you doing?
How are you?
It's good.
We're doing it at night.
It's very strange.
We never do the show at night.
This podcast could take a very odd turn. Episode 30.
Wow.
Martin
30,
Brodeur.
man.
Martin Brodeur.
You just took it. You
I know.
just a kidney punch right out of the gate. I don't even get to say.
I figured if I didn't ask you, I could just start throwing out names.
I think it's a no-brainer.
Episode Brodeur.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
episode
what we
Brodeur. Okay, but it's a good list, though, for number 30.
All of goalies, too.
Well,
right?
it's the number 30. Not too many forwards were number 30.
No, not too many good ones. Henrik Lundqvist.
Yeah, the current player. Ryan Miller.
Yeah.
At the Olympics.
A lot of potential Olympic heroes. I guess Miller was player of the tournament in 2010. Brodeur has won a gold before.
Yep.
And Lundqvist has Lundqvist won a gold in 2006.
I believe so.
And he might win it this year.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, okay, but that's because you're Canadian and ultimately extremely biased.
And you're a U.S. guy and ultimately
and
biased.
Picking Sweden. There you go. All
Rogie.
right.
You forgot Rogie Vachon.
Well, I didn't forget him. We just hadn't gotten to him yet. The whole second segment of the show is about Rogie Vachon. You just don't know it yet.
Okay.
So just be prepared for a lot of Rogie talk. No Yogi.
Hey, Yogi.
That's segment 3. Wow, maybe we shouldn't do this podcast at night. All right, so the Olympics are starting one day this week. I don't know.
They already started.
Well, but the hockey portion, the men's hockey portion,
starts
Wednesday or
Wednesday.
Thursday.
No, Wednesday.
Wednesday.
2 games.
But isn't that Tuesday our time, Wednesday Russian time, and then Thursday the U.S. and Canada play? But really
I'm going
it's Wednesday.
Eastern time. Everything
Okay.
I say is going to be East Coast time.
That won't be confusing at all for me.
And 2 games on Wednesday, February 12th. Czechs and Sweden, Latvia, Switzerland.
And so, what were the times?
12 p.m. Eastern, noon.
Really?
So that's 10 a.m. our time.
That's not bad at all.
For those of us that live in Arizona.
Or anywhere west of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
Although I guess if you're in California, it's
But
even
it's easy
earlier.
for everybody wherever they live because Eastern time's usually the standard.
But the first U.S. game, which is Thursday morning, is 7:30 Eastern time, which is 5:30 for us and 4:30 for our friends in California.
And that's why God invented the DVR.
Yes, that's exactly why the DVR was invented. So you and I have talked about this in past episodes of this podcast, and it seems to be gathering steam. And we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but this is probably the last year of NHL players in the Olympics. Or how about this? What percentage chance would you give it that this is the last year of NHL players in the Olympics, at least for a while?
If I was going to assign a percentage to it, it would have to be 95% or higher.
Okay.
Because it's not going to happen again.
I think your common, certainly your typical sports fan, I think is under the impression it's like 2% chance that they're not coming back for the 2018 games. And I think even your typical hockey fan is like 15% chance they don't come back. I'm with you. It's probably, I would put it at like 75%, but it's definitely over the 50-50 mark. I don't think we're seeing NHL players in the Olympics in 4 years.
No, I don't see them coming back. I really don't. And we had a show, pretty much a whole segment dedicated to this very topic. And because in one of his speeches, I forget where the commissioner was, he brought it up. And he brought up the whole World Cup format again. And that makes just way too much sense not to do it.
And to be fair, they didn't say there's no way that we're going to keep doing the Olympics, but the very fact that the commissioner is at least voiced a little bit of concern about doing it, and we talked about all the reasons why, we don't have to get into it again, but it is a 2.5 week break right in the middle of the season. The very fact that he already kind of has an alternate plan to implement the World Cup makes me think that they're probably pretty serious about it. And as we've said before, it's not like the games in 4 years are in Canada or the U.S. or Russia or even Sweden. They're somewhere where hockey isn't necessarily that big.
Right, and the other thing for me, though, is I find it just such a distraction. For the last 2 weeks, that's all we've talked about is what players are going to the Olympics, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. This guy's hurt, so he's not going, so we got a replacement for him. It's just, to me, it's just a big distraction. And if I'm a head coach on any NHL club, I don't know if I want that adversity when I'm trying to get my team to win at the tail end of the season. When they come back, there's not that much hockey left.
No, it's basically a sprint. A few coaches have described it that way, and it's about 22 to 24, 25 games, depending which team you coach. So it's not even a third of the season. And I know some coaches are approaching it almost as if starting next week, it's basically like a week-long training camp to get you back in for this final month and a half of the regular season. But we'll get into this in the second segment. There are teams right now that are playing very good hockey that I think are going to pay the price of now having to stop for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, as a coach, you have nothing or no say. I mean, you can voice what you would like your players to do in this downtime, but you have no control over it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 2-week vacation for these guys. There's guys getting married. There's guys taking
guys
trips.
Getting divorced, probably.
But there's, you know what I'm saying.
Hopefully not the same guys.
No, but they're doing things.
Yeah.
Away from hockey, away from that whole paradigm that's been built since September. Now it's just snapped, and they're just focus is gone somewhere else.
And I didn't even think of this earlier in the year when we talked about it, but it's not just the break and then the coming out of the break, it's the going into the break. And it's guys like Martin St. Louis who didn't get picked for Canada and all of a sudden he's playing much better because he's angry. Or it's guys like Bobby Ryan who didn't get picked for the U.S. and all of a sudden they go in a major slump.
Right.
And you know my thoughts on Bobby Ryan. I think he's one of the better goal scorers in the NHL. But ever since Team USA's roster was released, Ottawa has been punished essentially because Bobby Ryan hasn't been Bobby Ryan. And maybe that one exact example isn't specific to the Olympic thing. Maybe that's just a coincidence. But there's so many different players that if they were close and they didn't get named to the team, they either started playing a lot better or a lot worse.
Well, I think just to sum it up, I think the Olympics have throwing some X variables in, whether it's playing well, not playing well, lack of focus, distraction. There's all these variables that are now on your plate that weren't there before because the Olympics have all of a sudden reared its head and said, here we are, now you've got to think about us. And, I mean, you and I both say, I love the Olympics. I love the Winter Olympics more than I do the Summer Olympics. But, yeah, for the sport that we love, I think it's a distraction. I think the World Cup format is the way to go. And our guys just don't go over. And then when the Olympics do come back in 2018,
yeah,
it's junior players, it's collegiate players, it's back to the miracle on ice, it's college players winning a gold medal, it's young players. And to me, man, I'd rather watch that. I mean, I watch the Memorial Cup every year because I love watching junior players. I love watching those young guys play.
This turned out to be a great Olympic hockey preview. As we said, I bashed it for 10 minutes.
All right, well, let's turn to the preview end of it.
Well, because all of that said, I'm really excited to watch because this is basically like an all-star tournament that the guys care about. Like this is what no sport has been able to capture with their all-star games. The Major League Baseball tries to make it so that the all-star game matters and it impacts the World Series. NHL, NBA have great skills competitions, but ultimately the game doesn't matter. This is basically 6 all-star teams, and it matters to some of these guys more than the Stanley Cup.
That's a very interesting way to frame it, and I agree with you because these guys play hard. I mean, they play hard. Every Olympic I've watched, these guys are going hard. So, I mean, even if you watch the World Juniors, which is again at a younger age group, it's all-stars from the junior ranks. And you're right, it's 6 all-star teams going head-to-head. Because you got the best of the best. You got the best of the KHL. You got the best of the NHL. You got the best of the Sweden Elite Leagues. I mean, you've got the best of the best from each country that's participating.
And they've got to get together and play as a team in the span of about 3 days, really. I mean, as we're recording this right now, they have landed.
They've had their first practice.
Yeah.
And today is Monday, and their first game's in 2 days. So coaching staff has to throw a practice together, who we're going to put who with who. The women have already started to play.
That giant ice surface, which you and I were talking about before the show, that thing looks like they're playing in a hollowed-out shopping mall. It's just gigantic.
Okay, just for the THP listeners that have tuned in to this episode, we looked it up. The Olympic ice sheet, or the International ice sheet, is 200 feet long and 100 feet wide. So its width is half its length.
Yeah. This just turned into an algebra problem, but yes.
And the North American sheet that we're all used to watching the NHL play on is 200 feet, same length, but it's only 85 feet wide.
And that doesn't seem like that much, but I was watching one of the U.S. women's games, and it just looks huge. I don't know if it's the camera angle, but there are portions of the game where you can't see either end of the width part of the rink. So it just looks like it's just an endless sheet of ice.
You've played on the larger sheets?
I thought I had, but I don't remember playing on ice that wide.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of local rinks that have the wide sheet.
I have. There's not a rink here I haven't played on.
And it makes a big difference.
It
makes
absolutely.
a big difference. That little extra space, that extra 7.5 feet on each side makes a big difference.
All right, so here's how big of a difference it might make, okay? Because we'll get into our predictions here in just a second, but I think most people, the odds-on favorites are Canada to win the whole thing.
Well, wait a minute. Let's stay with the women.
Okay.
Before you go into the men's, because that's where you're going. You're going into the men's, right?
You don't know that, but yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I do know that.
Well,
of course I know that.
Fair enough.
All right. Because the women have already started to play.
All right.
The women are broken down into two groups, Group A, Group B. Well, that was creative.
It's pretty brilliant. No Metro Division. That's a shame.
Group A has the U.S., Canada, Finland, Switzerland. Group B is Russia, Sweden, Japan, Germany.
Okay, you lost me after USA and Canada because those are always the two teams that play for the gold medal.
Group A has already played 2 games. U.S. and Canada have won both of those games. Finland and Switzerland have lost. Group B has only played 1. Russia and Sweden are atop. Japan and Germany are at the bottom. What I don't get, and you know a little bit because you read something somewhere, the 2 top teams in the women's tournament are the U.S. and Canada, and they're in the same group.
Yeah, I don't know if this is implemented this year or not, but they're essentially, they didn't want to have a bunch of extremely lopsided games because the women's game, the U.S. and Canada and a couple other countries have developed their hockey programs a little bit more than some of these other teams. So there's a bit more of a discrepancy between the first place team in the women's game right now and say the 8th place team. So they kind of had it set up where you know that the U.S. and Canada and probably Russia as well and maybe Sweden are going to be deeper in the tournament. So they're essentially kind of already locked into semifinal spots.
Okay.
Does that clear things up for you? Because you look more confused than ever, and I just explained it, and I'm confused.
Yeah, it went from algebra to just confusion.
So that's what's known as calculus.
But anyways, U.S. and Canada are doing what they always do in the women's, and I think that it's going to boil down to United States and Canada on the women's side of hockey.
That is a brilliant prediction. Now that we're
it was pretty bold.
47 minutes into the show, can I get to the men's
sure,
Olympic hockey?
Go.
Okay. So back to the bigger ice surface. A lot of people, yourself included, would have Canada as the favorite this year. But since they started sending NHL players in '98, this is what's happened. Last year, Canada beat the U.S. in the gold medal game. It was in Vancouver, North American ice surface.
Your boy scored.
Yeah, but for the wrong country. 2006, it's in Italy. And so, bigger ice surface, Canada 6th, U.S. 7th.
I remember that.
That's a huge drop-off. It's not like they weren't NHL players. Then, 2002, Utah, North American ice surface, Canada 1, U.S. 2. 1998, Nagano, I'm pretty sure.
Would be an international sheet.
International sheet. The U.S. and Canada didn't medal. I don't have their exact spot. That's a huge discrepancy, and that can't be a coincidence. I'm not saying Canada won't win this year, but, it is a factor.
So you're telling me the European teams are going to dominate, or
they have an advantage that I think some people are downplaying. And I've talked to some of the players that are going to play for the European teams, and they're like, yeah, no, that's real. Our style of play over there is tailored to that bigger ice surface. And so when you're in a short tournament, I don't care how good you are, you have to, if you're used to playing North American hockey your whole life, you have to adjust in the span of 3 games.
Yeah, it's just a matter of that. The guys that are over there, to me in my head, are just so skilled that they're going to find a way to use that extra space. And I've said it before, I think where the problem comes into play is on the defensive side. The defensemen are going to have a problem with that extra space. The game is all about time and space. And if you release too soon or you make that one bad turnover and that space is taken away, there's a lot of space to use.
Well, I agree with you, and it ultimately comes down to talent and goaltending, either way. But how do you explain the U.S. and Canada not medaling in 98 or 2006? Not even medaling. Especially Canada.
They picked the wrong players those years.
All right. I guess that's true. I can't argue with that. Let me quickly go through a couple things here before we wrap up the segment. Injuries since last time we talked. Steven Stamkos out. Martin St. Louis in.
Okay. Why are you rushing?
It would because
because it's in Russia.
Ha! Yeah. Oh, jeez. I'm rushing because I want to leave now. But if they had passed up Martin St. Louis again, you're so proud of yourself for that.
Yes, I am.
It's almost as bad as me saying Kari Lehtinen is not letting in any goals the other night. Nobody talked to me for the rest of the evening. Valtteri Filppula, Mikko Koivu out for Finland, Henrik Sedin out for Sweden, Johan Franzen out for Sweden, Marian Gaborik out for Slovakia, Max Pacioretty almost out for Team USA. So we went for such a long period of time from when the rosters were named to basically 2 or 3 days, basically the week leading up to the Olympics. All of a sudden, a bunch of guys had to pull out then.
Right.
It looked like we were going to have the actual initial rosters going to the Olympics, and then all of a sudden everybody got hurt.
Well, I mean, that's going to happen in the NHL. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Henrik Sedin wants to be playing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, ribs. I don't know if you've ever had a rib injury. It's not nice.
No, it's not. So how does that work? Are Henrik Sedin and Daniel Sedin on opposite sides of the world right now?
Pretty much.
Is that even allowed?
I don't know. They've never been apart.
No, they've never been more than 10 feet apart. And now they're 10,000 miles apart? I don't know. Is that
Are they married? Not to each other.
No, I understand. Remember the old commercial where the guys order the Swedish twins?
Yeah.
And it's just Henrik and Daniel showing up in their jerseys dancing? Yeah. I don't know what that has to do with anything. All right. So here's a couple quick looks at. We'll just go through Canada and the U.S. real quick. Their forward lines. I don't think you've seen these.
Wait, before you get to the lines. No, go ahead. Go to the lines.
Do you want to talk more about the Swedish twins?
No, go.
Okay. Well, now I want to know what you had to say.
No, I got ahead of myself.
Oh, okay.
I just messed everything up, but go ahead.
That's fine. Here's Canada's forward lines. And I know they've only practiced 1 day, but I don't know how much they're going to tinker with these because they don't have any time. Kunitz, Crosby, Carter up front. And I don't think these are any specific order. Marleau, Getzlaf, Perry, Rick Nash, Taves, Sharp.
Rick Nash shouldn't even be there.
Jamie Benn, Patrice Bergeron, John Tavares. Really quickly, my 2 points before you just start trashing poor Rick Nash. Because of how quickly you have to get your team together, what stands out to me is Taves and Sharp on the same line, Crosby, Kunitz on the same line, Perry, Getzlaf on the same line.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
And also what stands out to me is I don't see Matt Duchene on any of those lines. So for as good of a season as he's had, he seems like him and Martin St. Louis are the odd man out right now. Heading into game 1. I mean, I'm sure they'll play at some point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a coach, you're in a tough spot. I mean, I think setting the lines up like that is perfect. You put guys that are used to each other, and then you start tinkering and tunking with who's going to be in what. I mean, I can see St. Louis in special teams because of his speed, his stick handling, PK, stuff like that. I can see him being special team.
But he's got to dress, though. If they don't, well, I mean, you got to be dressed to play hockey. But I'm saying, even you can only dress 12 forwards.
Correct.
Yeah. So, real quick, you're the Canadian here. Who starts in goal?
Price.
Okay. I
hands down.
It doesn't matter that Luongo won a gold medal for you last time?
No.
Okay.
He's not playing well right now.
Yeah, we'll get to Vancouver in a second. Team USA, I don't... Dustin Brown, Ryan Kessler, Patrick Kane. That's a line right now. What does that line accomplish? You take Patrick Kane. I'm not a Blackhawks fan, but Patrick Kane is a very skilled player and probably one of Team USA's best players, if not their best. Why is he on the line with Dustin Brown?
Yeah, you put him on a line with a grinder.
Yeah.
That hasn't scored much this year. Again, why is he on the roster? Next line.
Van Riemsdyk, Pavelski. Whatever. If you're going to put Dustin Brown on the roster, that's fine, but why is he on?
Okay, who's on the second line?
Van Riemsdyk, Pavelski, and Kessel. I don't know if these are the exact
orders.
That line. I like that line. Well, you like it because it's two Maple Leafs.
But again, two teammates.
Yeah, and all those guys.
And two teammates that are doing really well this year.
They're both scoring and Pavelski's scoring.
Yeah.
Parise. It's Parise this year, right? It used to be Parise, and now he's changed it again. Okay. Parise, Backus, and Oshie. So, again, two more teammates.
I like that.
I like that line, too. And then Ryan Callahan, Paul Stastny, and Max Pacioretty.
I like that line.
So maybe
that's their fourth line?
Well, no, I don't know if that's the. Well, yeah, that probably would be their fourth line.
That's a good line.
So that's.
You heard it here first. That's a good line.
That's good. That line of 3 Olympians is pretty dangerous.
That's a good line.
Ryan Miller or Jonathan Quick?
Miller.
Yeah.
You got to go Miller.
I think so.
It's Miller time.
Well, if I'm the U.S., and I am, because I pay a USA hockey fee every year.
So do I.
I've paid $40.
I pay my $40.
I actually get to pick who plays where. I'm giving each of them a start in the little prelim rounds, and then whoever plays the best in their first start is the guy the rest of the way. It's just
What
the
if
way
your
it is.
starting goalie in game 1 gets a shutout? You still hold to that?
No, then he gets game 2, and the other guy gets game 3.
What if he has shutouts back to back?
Then he's the starting goalie.
You just ride him.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a 6 or 7 game tournament. All right, so real quick, Russia, I'm not going to go through all their lines, but the top line of Ovechkin, Malkin, and Alexander Semin.
That's a good line.
And
you heard it here first. That's a good line.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this podcast. People will be confused. Radulov, Datsuk, and Kovalchuk. It's not a bad second line either. So,
what about Swedes? You got him?
I do. Of course I do. Who do you think you're talking to over here? Landeskog, Zetterberg, Alex Steen.
Oof.
Daniel Sedin, who I just picture being lost. Just like wandering the streets
Henrik.
of Sochi. With Backstrom and Louis Eriksson. Gustav Nyquist, Patrick Berglund, Daniel Alfredson.
Who's the starting goalie?
Lundqvist. Really?
Really? You answered it.
Yes, I did. I didn't say which Lundqvist. I like the Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Erik Karlsson top defensive pairing too.
Tournament's over. Podium's there.
Okay.
And national anthems are playing.
All right. We have been doing this podcast for a while, so it might be over.
Gold medal.
You're going to make me pick a gold medalist?
Yep.
Well, give me yours first.
Canada.
Give me your top 3 first. You know who my 3 are. I just don't know what order, so I'm putting them in my head right now.
Canada, Sweden, U.S.
It's tough this year. It really is. I think I would be stupid to pick against Canada, but I really like Sweden. How's that for an answer?
That's a non-answer.
And I think that the U.S. has kind of gotten a bad rap because they did snub a few players that should be there. And I don't know if they can afford to make that mistake, especially on the ice surface. But I think they're going to be better than people expect. I mean, they're ranked like 7th. They're going to finish 3rd or 4th. I don't know that you keep Russia off the podium in their own country.
Number 1.
They'll build up a second podium for
Give me
them.
number 1.
You just want to hear me say Canada's going to win the gold.
Give me number
I'm
1.
not going to do it. I'm going to say Sweden, just to spite you.
Okay, so Sweden.
Sweden, Canada.
Sweden, Canada, U.S. Who's your third?
I'm not going to leave the U.S. off, but I don't know. I can't envision a podium where Russia's not up there.
They're not going to be there. I'm telling you right now. You heard it first, right here.
It's a lot of firsts. It's just one big breaking news podcast. What if people listen to this after they've heard it somewhere else? You may have said it first, but they didn't hear it here first.
It doesn't matter. As long as I say it first, that's all that matters.
Fair enough. Give me a dark horse team. Oof. One that's not one of those
Wasn't ready
4.
for that.
No, you weren't. Exactly. You see what it's like now to have the tables turned on you?
Russia.
I'll go first. Finland. Goaltending. Can't argue with
Yeah,
that goaltending.
I can't argue with that. That's a good pick.
Finland's lost some players, though, so I don't know that they're going to be meddling, but it's good goaltending.
You're listening to The Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Segment 2. Doug says he thinks we're recording, so I'm filled with confidence.
There you go.
And I should point this out. We're on TuneIn now. This is a major breakthrough for us technologically.
Nice.
It took us, I don't know.
TuneIn.com.
TuneIn.com. Search The Hockey Podcast.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
On to the NHL.
Okay.
They're not playing right now.
Well, we did this podcast all summer and they weren't playing, so hockey never goes away.
That's true. And the impact of the Olympic break, we touched on it in that first segment. But there's a couple teams specifically that I think it's going to either help or hurt. So I'm going to get your thoughts on this as well. But I'll start off with a team that I think it might help. How about that? Because you said there's not any it helps.
I don't think it helps anybody.
Okay, I've got one.
I think it messes with everybody. I shouldn't use the word help. It messes with everybody.
Well, I've got a team for you that needs to be messed with right now.
Okay.
Vancouver's dropped 7 in a row and 16 of 20. So it can't hurt them. How's that?
Well, it might.
How? What, are they going to lose 17 of 20?
That's what I mean. It might be to a point where they don't get out of their slump.
See, I think that they have
because here's the deal. Here's the deal, and I touched on it in the first segment. These guys are on vacation for 2 weeks. Coach is nowhere near them. I think they're in that slump because of the bad behavior of John Tortorella at that Calgary game when he was suspended for 15 days and all that
mumbo jumbo,
hoopla, brouhaha, all that stuff was surrounding that team. I don't think that played well with that team's head.
It didn't. They weren't playing well before that either. But the only reason I think it helps them, other than the fact that they can't be playing much worse, they're still right in the playoff race in the West.
Which is amazing.
Henrik Sedin gets basically 2.5 weeks to recover that he wasn't going to get if the season was just going normal. And, that's something else about the Olympic season. If you get hurt, or even if you don't get hurt, there's games every other night. The schedule is so condensed this year. And January was ridiculous. Teams, pick your team. They were basically playing every other night. In March, it's even more condensed. So Henrik Sedin gets 2.5 weeks.
But his brother doesn't.
He does not, but his brother's not hurt.
Yet.
Well, but I assume when one feels pain, the other one feels the same pain. So maybe his brother is hurt.
But no, Vancouver's sitting right now with 63 points, and the 8th spot team, which is Dallas, only has 64. So even with those outstanding numbers, not outstanding, but remarkable numbers that you just rattled off, they're only a point out of the 8th spot.
Yeah, the Western Conference, I don't have the exact number, but at the start of the year, the West was just so dominant over the East. Mm-hmm. It's still lopsided in their favor, in the West's favor, but it's not as crazy as it was at the start of the year. The East has kind of evened some things out a little bit. Phoenix and Dallas both have 64. Vancouver has 63. And Winnipeg has 62. They should fire their coach every month. Dallas and Winnipeg, actually, I'll put them both in there, are two teams that I think gets hurt by the break, especially Dallas. Dallas is 6-1-2 in their last 9.
They're losing a lot of momentum sitting still. I agree.
They gave up 12 goals total in their last 9 games. 4 of them were in one game, so 8 goals over 8 games. They surged up into the playoff picture, and it's kind of like the opposite of Vancouver. They can't be helped by having a 2.5-week break.
No.
At best, they just are doing what they were already doing.
I think one team that go to the other coast, I think Detroit actually might benefit from this break.
Yeah, I could see that.
That team is just kind of not cohesive, for lack of a better word. And I think that maybe a little R&R is what they need.
Yeah, they've had a lot of guys.
Half that team's over in Sochi. But
Well, and Ken Holland had a quote today, I think it was today, where he said, yeah, Pavel Datsyuk's probably not 100%, but I don't think, I'm paraphrasing here. Actually, the exact quote is, I'm sure if he couldn't play, he wouldn't play. And
right.
Speaking about for Russia, because that's the other thing. These guys are very crazy about playing for their country. I give Henrik Sedin credit if he's hurt to not make it worse playing for Sweden and just say, screw you, Vancouver. You know what I mean? Because that's the team that's paying him. So I'm not saying Datsyuk's doing that, but there is risk for teams that are sending guys that are already kind of hurt over there. Detroit right now is the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. And let me just say...
And there's 3 teams knocking on their door.
Yeah, they'll make the playoffs. We've had this discussion before.
I said they won't.
I know. and one of us is going to be publicly shamed on this podcast.
I'm sorry to hear that. Do you cry in public?
I will if that's what it takes. I will if Pittsburgh plays Detroit in the first round of the playoffs. That doesn't seem fair at all.
You don't have to worry about that. Detroit won't be in the playoffs
Detroit
this year.
won't be in the playoffs.
No, they won't.
And I at least want them to move up. And the more I'm looking at it now, they can't move up because stupid Toronto has 70 points. Okay, I'm back to the Olympics. That's all I care. I'm not looking forward to playing Pavel Datsyuk in the first round of the playoffs.
You're not going to.
All right.
It's going to be either Ottawa or Washington.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else stand out to you here at the break? Anything else you just want to get off your chest at break time?
The West. I keep going back to the West. I mean, it's just so tight, and we've already touched on Winnipeg and Dallas. Nashville's kind of fallen back. They were up there for a while,
a little bit,
and they've kind of dropped off. So I don't know.
What do you think Edmonton's going to do with the first pick this year? Or was that's a different podcast?
That's a different podcast.
Still a little bit early on that one? Okay.
I mean, I never expected. Maybe I should go through my notes and let me tell you again where you picked Edmonton.
No. You had Edmonton winning the Stanley Cup, I think.
No.
I thought we were doing predictions for 1984. And
okay.
I was just trying to be accurate. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, the East is the East.
You heard it here first, folks.
Call back.
Montreal is playing pretty decent hockey. It's the East, like I said, has gotten better. The Rangers have really surged. That's another team that might be hurt, actually, by the Olympic break. But at the same time, if your goalie goes over and wins a gold medal for Sweden, then I think he'll be fine when he comes back. So it'll be interesting to see the impact. We've got the Olympics right now, which is, like I said, as much as I don't think it's going to happen in 4 years, having NHL players there, I'm really looking forward to it this year.
But, yeah, I mean, I'll look forward to it in 2018, even if it's not NHL players. Because to be really honest with you, I liked it when it wasn't NHL players.
Okay.
I did. I really did.
So that was 94 was the last year.
And I really, really like the concept of that World Cup tournament in August, where you use the pros, where you use what's over in Sochi right now, and you do a tournament in August. What a great tune-up before training camp for these guys.
No, I'm absolutely with you.
And it's only, it'd be every 4 years. So it's not like it's every single year that they're going to do that. But what a great tune-up. You got 4 years to plan it. You can bang it out. You can have just a great, great tournament. Lots of TV coverage. What better way every 4 years to kick off an NHL season?
And it's a different city than whatever city's getting the Olympics. We'll get to host that.
And then we take NHL Revealed and 24/7 and mold them into a different series to follow the World Cup.
Oh, now I like where you're going. Yeah, see? No, okay.
Yeah, so I was so excited the other day.
Why?
Well, we both work in Phoenix,
yes.
And I was at the Coyotes Blackhawk game.
Oh, they were there.
And NHL Revealed was there. I was like a little kid.
We should touch on that night a little bit in news and notes. There were other people there that night. But
okay,
you're right. Me
sure.
and you, we just saw the NHL Revealed camera guy, and we're like, hey, man, what's going on?
You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Podcast for even more hockey news. #do it.
Final segment, news and notes.
Our favorite segment.
Very quickly before we get into it, the 3 stars of the week were just named in the final 10 seconds of that last segment.
Let me guess, Mr. Lettinen was one of them.
Well, I already told you the names, so that's not
No,
really
you didn't.
fair. Oh, yeah, that's true, I didn't.
No,
but
you
telepathically, you probably knew. Yes, Kari Lettinen was, I guess he was number 2. I don't know if these are in order. Nobody tells me anything, they just give me names. Carey Price, which is another reason I think he's probably starting for Team Canada, and Jerome McGinley, who is making $1.8 million a year.
That's outstanding. I just, come on.
What a deal for Boston.
I mean, that GM looks like a mad scientist. I mean, 1.8 for Jerome McGinley.
Can we do a podcast one of these weeks? Maybe we'll just do it in the summer if things are slow. All the guys that made more than Jerome McGinley this year that weren't good.
That's a lot of guys.
It's like a 3-hour podcast.
That's a lot of guys.
We should have McGinley come in and just co-host it with us. Oh, yeah, I'm better than that guy. No, the guys. Or the GMs of those players that got overpaid. Anyway, those are your 3 stars. NHL Revealed, we're 3 episodes in. I don't think there's one this week.
No, I don't think there's one this week either. But like I said in segment 2, I was very excited to see the guys come in and help them shoot footage of the Phoenix Coyotes and the Chicago Blackhawks on Friday, February 7th.
Yeah, so you and I are like the ultimate fanboys for that show anyway,
yes.
Because it's just fantastic. But now they were here. I don't know if you tried to sneak into frame on any of the camera shots, but not only were they there for the Blackhawks, members of the Miracle on Ice team were there too. So that was a crazy night, and I would imagine that's going to be at least partially on NHL Review.
That would have to be, and not only were 10 members of the 1980 Olympic team there to send off the Chicago Olympians and the Phoenix Olympians, but in the second intermission of that game, Alice Cooper performed.
The real Alice Cooper. This is not like
it
wasn't
wasn't
some guy named Alice.
It wasn't some cover band. It was the guy. And the first piece of vinyl I ever bought at the age of 13 was Alice Cooper's School's Out.
And that's awesome.
So, I mean, for me, NHL Revealed in the building.
Yeah, no, that was a crazy night.
Alice Cooper is performing, and he performs 3 hits.
Performing unannounced.
Right.
I mean, you and I knew, but not that far ahead of time. But it wasn't like announced, and that was a way to get fans in. Whatever. Fans weren't there to see Alice Cooper because they did not know he was going to perform. It was just another cherry.
Right. I had a couple of parents whose sons I coach came up to me. Hey, we're going to be at the game, Coach. I said, stick around for the second intermission.
Yeah.
Whoa, what's going on? Can't tell ya, but you're going to like it.
Yeah, it was really cool, and he definitely rocked, and he goes to Coyotes games. So if anybody saw him at the game, they weren't like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Because he's there at a lot of games.
He's there at a lot of games.
But they probably got suspicious when they saw him pulling out a guitar and setting up a little soundstage. So that was really cool. The 1980 Miracle on Ice team, that was just a ridiculous
I had
night.
Goosebumps,
Yeah,
dude.
was...
It was 17,000 hockey fans, and the guys were introduced, and then that USA chant started, and the hair on my neck, I had goosebumps. I was like, it was just phenomenal.
I won't lie to you, I watched Miracle the next day. How could I not?
How can you not?
I mean, I was going to anyway because every 4 years you have to watch it, at least every 4 years.
And I had the extreme pleasure of meeting Mike Ruruzione one-on-one, which was a thrill and a half for me. And then we both got to meet Ken Morrow.
Yeah, and he was really just, you can tell, a very intelligent guy. He's director of scouting with the Islanders now. It's interesting to see what all those guys have gone on to do, and he told us, and I don't know if Ruzioni specifically told you or if he said it on TV, everything's a blur from that day, but as much as those guys are linked together forever, I mean, it's
Right.
almost bigger now than it was. I shouldn't say bigger because it was huge just because of the political climate and everything then. But 34 years later, it's still huge what they did, and it's not going to ever get diminished.
It'll never diminish.
For as much as those guys are linked together in history, it's not often that many of them are together in the same place, physically together.
Yeah, which I thought was way cool, and I thought that the Phoenix Coyotes as an organization did a great job in making that happen.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights of the year just across the NHL.
Then just a little side note, in our preparation to meet Mr. Morrow, if you think about it, he won a gold medal. He goes to the Islanders organization, puts on their uniform, and wins the Stanley Cup all in the same year.
Yeah, 4 months later, I think.
Right.
3 or 4 months later.
And then he wins three
more
more after that.
So in the span of 4 years,
how awesome is that?
Gold medal and 4 Stanley Cups.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
Yeah, and he had done it all by like the age of 26. I started to think what I had accomplished by the age of 26, and I finally just blacked out. So there's an NHL trade freeze right now.
Yep.
But the trade deadline is March 5th. So they'll come out of the Olympics, and all of a sudden it'll be like the stock exchange, basically, where there'll be a bell and you got to go.
Okay, so we're big hockey guys. We have access to TSN, which is the Canadian equivalent of ESPN. These guys are hockey bonkers with their coverage of the NHL.
Yeah, that would have been a good name for this podcast, Hockey Bonkers.
And they have a trade deadline show.
Oh, yeah.
And they have
like
the
9 hours.
Like the clock is ticking, right?
It's worse than the Super Bowl pregame show. Not that it's bad, but how long it is.
How many trades do you think are going to happen? Do you think it's going to be a busy year?
On the actual trade deadline day?
Yeah. Do you think it'll be a busy day?
No, and here's why.
Okay.
Everybody's still in it. Except Calgary, Edmonton, and Buffalo and Florida.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I don't think it's going to be busy at all.
But I will say this. I think there will be a couple kind of big trades, but they always seem to happen a few days before the trade deadline.
Yeah, it'll be, and I think the trades aren't going to be wholesale trades. They're not going to be renters trades. I think they're just going to be tinkering trades.
Yeah.
There's that word again.
But at least you said the full word this time and not tinking. I will say this. Whatever I win from you on the Detroit makes the playoffs bet, I'd be willing to bet that the LA Kings make a fairly significant trade. That is one team I would guarantee you makes
I think
a trade.
they have to because of the teams below them pushing for that third spot in the Pacific.
I think they have to because they average 2.25 goals a game, which is 29th in the NHL.
Yeah, and one of those guys is over in Sochi.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah.
I mean, like
2. Dustin Brown. 3. Jeff Carter, Dustin Brown, who's apparently top-line U.S. guy, and Kopitar is Team Slovenia.
Yeah, but at least Kopi is performing.
Yeah, he is.
The other two,
Brown, points-wise, no, and Carter has been kind of
he's kind of iffy.
But either way, that's a team that I don't think is content to make the playoffs, although they're in danger of missing the playoffs. But that's a team that intends to go deep. And I mean, the Western Conference Finals last year, Stanley Cup the year before.
I can honestly say that if they don't make a trade, if they don't do something, they'll be a wild card team.
If they're lucky.
I mean, you agree with that?
Yeah. And
so who do you think they're looking at?
Mike Camilleri, former King, Matt Molson, Former King.
Sam Gagner.
That one might actually be the one that happens the quickest. But other names that have been thrown around,
Sure.
These are interesting. And these aren't necessarily just for the Kings. Thomas Vanek, for all the Islanders.
How crazy is that? One of the guys I coach with is from the island. And when that initial trade for Molson was made,
yeah,
I thought he was going to just go ballistic. He goes, Coach, what the? I know. I mean, you had all that chemistry in Molson and
John
Tavares going, and you just break it up. Now you go to re-sign Vanek, and he goes, nah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not like that's a shock. There was never guaranteed that he was going to re-sign there. He might still, but whatever. Ryan Miller, obviously not a goal scorer, but
boy, you and I have had this conversation.
Not on the air though.
I think that he stays in Buffalo.
Well, I don't agree with you. Except,
where's he going to go?
That's the thing. If you are a playoff team, you probably have a goalie, and the team he keeps getting linked to is St. Louis, and I don't understand it.
That to me would be a bad move. I mean, St. Louis has solid goaltending.
It would be the kind of the trade I've heard, or at least the one I imagine when I just sit up at night thinking about who Buffalo and St. Louis would trade with each other. That's how I fall asleep. Buffalo, I'm sure, would get back Jake Allen, who we saw play last year. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it could be a good move for Buffalo because if they're not going to re-sign Ryan Miller, anything they get is a good move. Maybe Jake Allen's your goalie of the future or whatever. Maybe he's pushes Enroth. But I don't understand why St. Louis would do it because you're going to have to give up something to get Ryan Miller. Mm-hmm. A, he might not re-sign. B, he's better than Halak, but how much better than Halak?
Yeah. No, I think that Buffalo has to offer Miller a good deal, a long-term deal. I think if I'm Ryan Miller and my agent, I look at the other 29 teams and say, where do I fit? And where do I fit long-term?
I mean, as far as teams, if you're Ryan Miller and you're going to get traded, you want to end up on a team that is either in the playoffs or making a push for the playoffs. And the only team I can really see that is in a playoff spot or making a push that needs goaltending, at least in the East, I guess is Washington. And I think I've heard that any sort of trade there has already kind of been shot down.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't see any other teams that are
because Ottawa's got good goaltending. Columbus has good goaltending. Washington would make sense. What about the East? What about the other conference?
Where
West? Would you go? Yeah. Winnipeg?
Yeah, but I mean that trade's just
he's not
going to
go.
No, he's not going to resign there. If you're trading for Ryan Miller, you have to pretty much have a guarantee he's going to resign with you.
Right.
So, I don't know. St. Louis, Chicago, Colorado, Minnesota, Anaheim, San Jose, LA, Phoenix, they all have goaltending. Vancouver has goaltending too.
Yeah, that's why I say Buffalo is where he's going to, because he's got really nowhere to go unless somebody gets super creative.
Detroit? No.
I
mean, Jimmy Howard's their guy.
Toronto.
They haven't signed for a long time. Toronto needs a fifth goalie. That's true. They can throw him in there. Chris Stewart, last name I want to throw out there.
Really?
Talks that he might get traded. There's a few teams I could think of that could use a Chris Stewart. As long as you get good Chris Stewart. You can't get bad Chris Stewart.
Wow.
There's a lot of up and downs with Chris Stewart. But if St. Louis was really, and he's expendable, I guess, to the Blues because they've got so many weapons up front. If you could get a guy like that from St. Louis, I think they're going to just charge you a ton.
Right.
But a power forward like that, 15 goals and 11 assists so far this year. So a bit of a down year, but we've seen what he can do in the past.
Well, sometimes change the scenery sparks people.
64 points in 2009-10.
Unless you're Rick Nash. But anyways.
Your Rick Nash hatred. The man is a beast.
Really?
He's good. Yeah, I'm going to laugh. I'm actually not going to laugh. I'm going to cry when Canada wins the gold on a Rick Nash goal. And you're like, I told you should have been there.
That won't happen.
That's it for episode 30. Join us next week as we recap the early rounds of Olympic play and look ahead to the NHL stretch run.
And also, THP fans, we might have to sit down and see if we need to change our Olympic predictions.
Oh, well, yeah, you will. Plus, whatever else happens in the next 7 days, thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.